So good morning to you all. And I think I'm going to be following the example of Mr. Leffers by simply saying, my brothers and sisters, and no more very Reverend Cardinal or Monsignor, anything like that. So I wish to greet all of you, my dear friends, in the name of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. On its behalf, also say how glad I am to be here on behalf of the Council to be part of this inaugural meeting of business leaders, Catholic business leaders in Hungary, in Budapest here. You have the text in Hungarian. And driving from the airport here, I tried to give myself a crash course in Hungary, but I didn't succeed. So I'll now be able to. But, my dear friends, since you have the text, I'll speak a lot around it and just really go to the text itself. You know, in 1963, when Pope John the 23rd announced the beginning of the Second Vatican Council, his words were that he wanted to throw open the windows of the church so that the church can see the world outside and so that the world outside can see into the church. With those words with which Pope John the 23rd opened the Second Vatican Council, he signaled a new relationship between church and society, which subsequently invited the church to provide what is said in Evangelii in Gaudium et Spes as the affective solidarity between the church and society. And it is from this new relationship between church and society that our own council, Justice and Peace, derives its impetus in developing the various types of relationship between church and society. Therefore, with what we gathered here to do today, inspired by the new insight of this council, the church feels that the time is over to point accusing fingers at any segment in society, but rather to discover how it can enter into relationship with all segments of society, because all of that is called to salvation, and all of that become beneficiaries of the church evangelizing mission. And so one of the ways of bringing the gospel to humanity is to be able to find a strategy of addressing the gospel to different segments of society according to their own level and according to their own interests and according to their own expertise. Therefore, when Pope Benedict came out with the encyclical Caritas in Veritate, he invited the world to, especially the world of business. And again, this encyclical, Caritas in Veritate, was originally meant to be an anniversary document, celebrating the anniversary of Populorum Progressio of Pope Paul VI, Solicitudo Rei Socialis of Pope John Paul II, and then Centesimus Annus. So it was meant to be an encyclical celebrating the encyclicals on human development. But before the encyclical could be signed and published, we had the financial crisis in 2008. And because of that, Pope Benedict withheld the signing of the encyclical to work into it the consequences of the financial crisis. And so Caritas in Veritate does not only talk about human integral development, but it also talks about the consequences of the financial crisis and the need for the world to reform the financial situation for the common good of everybody. And one of the principles that Pope Benedict proposed for the reform of the financial crisis is the invitation to do business, inspired also by the principle of gratuity and by the principle and the logic of gift. This is the crucial introduction that Pope Benedict made to the consideration of finance and business and all, the principle of gratuity and the logic of gift. Therefore, our council decided to organize a small seminar to explore the implications of the principle of gratuity and the logic of gift on business. And the result of that is the vocation of the business leader that we gathered here to present. So, my dear friends, the basic inspiration then of the document that we're presenting over here, the vocation of the business leader, signals three things. The new relationship between church and society, as a result of which the church does not simply want to say business is bad, business is bad, business is bad, but to see a concrete way of inviting business to be Christian, in a way then to invite business people to bring their faith into their business and the exercise of their business. And the third, as Professor Leffer said at the beginning, to invite business to open up to the transcendental dimension of it, to make room for God also in business. Therefore, what I'm about to do briefly this morning is to take you quickly through this small document that we presented, meant to then explore the opening of this. So, one of the strategies we adopted, one of the ways was, after the seminar, to discover how the logic of gift and the principle of gratuity can be applied to business. The conclusion was to refer to business as a vocation. Hitherto in the church, it's only people who want to become priests, or people who want to become religious, or people who want to go for whatever thing, who are referred to as having a vocation. But we decided to widen the scope of this expression and to make all of humanity consider themselves, to the extent that everybody is created in the image and likeness of God. There is the invitation inbuilt in all of us to always respond to God as a point of reference for everything that we do. And that is a point of referring to this also as a vocation. And therefore, we decided to invite business people to look at their business in terms of a vocation, to encourage them to recognize that in their own business, they are responding to a call also from God, a call from God to transform everything that God created to serve the common good or to serve the needs of the human person. I give some concrete examples. We're sitting now in these pews on benches made of wood. God created the tree, but he didn't create furniture. It takes business to transform wood into furniture. God created natural resources, iron, tin, gold, and all, but it takes business and human ingenuity to transform them into jewels, into microphones, into computers and things like this. So concretely, business is continuing God's work of creation by making the resources God bestowed on humanity to serve the concrete and specific needs of humanity. So in this sense, then, we want to refer to business as a vocation, a response to God's call to serve humanity with everything that he created. So when then we say business is a vocation, we want to invite people to consider that as a calling from God, our Creator, that creation and everything created is purposely willed by God. Therefore, the meaning of everything that exists is determined with reference to God. So this reference to God is the crucial part. Professor Leffers referred to that as the pneuma, inviting people to open up to the transcendental dimension of everything that they do. Accordingly, then, the sense and the value of human activity are not fully discovered without reference to the God of creation. All human activity, therefore, affects the human person, his existence, and his world, and they must be related to God and to be seen as contribution to and a continuation of God's work of creation by the human person, who himself is creating the image and the likeness of God. So, on account of this, at the beginning of this year, for example, Professor Schwab, as you all know, of Davos, had invited the Pope to come to Davos to speak. The Pope couldn't go, but he sent a message. And he asked me to go read that message. And from that message, I bring a small quote for you. That's why, as has been repeated this morning to you. Now, after the Pope's message, we were wondering whether the Pope took the quote from us, from our document, or the Pope thought about the quote himself. We don't know where he took it from. But then the Pope says that business, in fact, is a noble vocation. By that time, we had published our small book, so we don't know whether he had seen it or not. But we don't claim credit for the thoughts of the Pope, you know. So the Pope said in the message to Davos, business, in fact, is a vocation, and a noble vocation, provided that those engaged in it see themselves challenged by a greater meaning in life. Such men and women are able to serve more effectively the common good and to make the goods of this world more accessible to all. That being the case, business therefore belongs to such human activity. And entrepreneurs should see themselves as called by God to exercise their necessary and important skills and activities in order to assist in God's work of creation. Properly understood, then, business leadership is indeed a calling, a vocation, a very noble role, and the church takes great joy in supporting this noble role that we call business. So no more to sit back and condemn business. And today, from my last visit in Latin America, in Santiago, in Chile, and Buenos Aires, some business people still feel that the church pretty much is still condemnatory, that they still think that a lot of bishops and priests still look at business and say, and still the attitude towards business is still not very warm. But it's something that we hope we can change, okay, with our ongoing publication of this document. Because business is not to be condemned, it's not to be set aside. Business as a noble vocation means that it belongs to God's plan. It continues God's work of creation, so it must be encouraged and it must be provided with the necessary spiritual guidance to enable them to fulfill their own vocation. So it is a task, therefore, for pastors. When that is the case, we recognize then that as we try to encourage business to so respond to their vocation, we recognize that normally business people doing your work, you face a lot of challenges. The challenge of intense competition, the need for greater efficiency, and the increasing pressure to be profitable because the stakeholders are looking for it. People who have invested in the business are looking for it. And if the chairman goes to a board meeting at the end of the year, and he goes to say, because I wanted to be charitable, I can't declare profits, they'll probably boot him out. So we recognize that these challenges are there for business. You need to deal with competition. To stay in business, you must be able to compete. Sometimes the competition is fair, sometimes the competition is unfair. And again, I can share a lot of experience from me. I'm not a businessman, but I talk with a lot of business people, and so I know about some experiences. From my own country where I come from, there is a business lady who imports aluminum and makes cooking utensils. Then an Indian company also arrived in Ghana to also establish a factory to do cooking utensils. But then the Indian group has a subsidiary outside in Switzerland. So when they import the aluminum, it doesn't come directly to Ghana. It goes to the Switzerland and it gets re-invoiced. And the re-invoicing means that the price of the aluminum is brought down. So when it comes to Ghana, the tax they pay on the aluminum is lower than the tax that the person who imports directly pays. Unfair competition. As a result of that, one has to struggle to be in business, the other one makes a lot of profit. So these are challenges that business people face. Then there's also the need for greater efficiency in business. Then, of course, the need to be profitable. And therefore, as we encourage people to deal with this challenge, we bring to them the insight of Pope Benedict. The logic of gift, which arises in the encyclical of Pope Benedict, Caritas in Veritate, where Benedict observed that every Christian is called to practice charity in truth in a manner corresponding with his own task and his own work, and that the principle of gratuitousness or generosity and the logic of a gift must find their place within normal economic activity and commercial relationship. And therefore, with this logic, the Pope then evolves the three values stated below, that there is the need to feel oneself as being a steward, not just owner of the resources entrusted to us, but a steward. A sense of stewardship is implied. Then there is the need to maintain in focus the need to work towards the common good, not only private goods, but goods which are destined for all people. And at the end of this, we'll see that one of the things that we'll be saying to business is the business interest in producing not only good, but goods which are really good, goods which really serve the well-being of society, and then to consider persons who are engaged as staff and who are served by the goods, not merely as resources for profit-making. So when the church then begins to speak to business, it begins to share reflection on gifts in Caritas in Veritate, which means, and what it means for business. Then this small booklet we provided then intends to be a vademecum, a handbook for business practice and teaching. It is not exhaustive. It doesn't cover everything that you encounter in business, but it's a beginning point that we want to offer. And then to also observe that since this was launched in 2012, it already exists in so very many different languages. We gather here this morning to present and to introduce the Hungarian translation. At this point, as we stand here this morning, it's been translated into 15 different languages. Next year, in April, we shall be in Thailand, Bangkok, to present a Thailandese translation of this document. And a translation in Chinese is also waiting in Hong Kong to be also presented. So it's a book which is which is being appreciated. And it is also being used in a lot of business schools in the United States and elsewhere as a course material for some of the students to use. And so this book then has a small handbook which was born out of this seminar. and meant to inspire and give support to business vocation, was therefore produced by people in universities like here, but also people in business. And people in universities like University of St. Thomas in Minnesota in the US, and then people in business, Union Park. Your former president, Mr. Pierre Lecoq, was very much instrumental in the production of this business. And we're glad to be here this morning for this Hungarian presentation to the public. So these are some of the translations you're looking at in Arabic, in Polish, in Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, Portugal Portuguese, because they say they are two different things. When we were going to Belo Horizonte in Brazil to present that thing, we had a Portuguese translation. But we got then the Brazilians say, no, Brazilian Portuguese is different from Portugal Portuguese. So we had to do a new translation, Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. So that also became the thing. And so, what is it all about, my dear friends? The danger of business people, and indeed of all of us, is that too often we take our gifts as our own private possession rather than as gifts that go through us to serve others. And so in Catholic social teaching, this logic, so that's Pope Benedict, the logic was expressed in Gaudium et Spes as man who is the only creature on earth which God willed for himself, can him fully understand himself only through a sincere gift of himself. This is what Pope Benedict developed as the logic of gift. And Benedict explains that this placement of the logic of gift within business is one of the great challenges before us. And that's also what is giving title to your conference over here as investing in values. And if this generosity fails to animate business and its institutions, which is where much of the world works, we will do great damage to the larger society. And so an important insight of the vocation document is the conviction that business person is called not just to do business, but to be a particular kind of a leader. In business, and like any other kind of work, business must confront what John Paul II called the subjective dimensions of work. What does that mean? Pope John Paul II encouraged us to, when we're talking about work, not to think about work only as what we produce by our efforts and labor, but to also think about what work does to the human person who is the worker. His own psychological growth, the encouragement of his own spirit of creativity and innovativeness, and the sense of fulfillment that he attains. So this, for Pope John Paul II, was the spiritual dimension of work, which also needs to be considered. Therefore, work changes not only the external world, but also the interiority of the one who does the work, the heart, the soul, and the mind. So our actions at work as well as in life shape our destiny, and they move us to a place within eternal, a place with eternal implications. So to these eternal implications, the Vocation Handbook points at the very beginning in the Gospel of Jesus, where Jesus tells us, from everyone who has been given much, much would also be demanded or required. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much would also be asked. And therefore, business people have been given a lot and great resources, and the Lord asks them to do great things. This, then, is their vocation. The vocation, then, is that gives a gifted character of business, which carries spiritual implications, and business leaders have significant means to undertake something, and with a legal minimalism, not to be pursued as simply not to cheat or not to lie or not to deceive, but we want to encourage business people to respond to their vocation that makes an irreplaceable contribution to the material world and even the spiritual well-being of people. So it is about a meaningful life that opens the business person to God's will, not simply their own will, in the day-to-day decisions of ordinary life, which gives us the capacity to share goods in common and to build our business. And so as we continue, the social doctrine of the church helps us to respond to this call of our own vocation, the vocation of the business leader. At the center of the social doctrine of the church is the fundamental dignity of the human person. And I'm glad that when we had to answer the questions about what we put first, human dignity got the biggest vote, and then justice and the other values followed. Because human dignity is, if you want, the basic, and everything else becomes expressions of the human dignity. Human rights, justice, freedom of religion, everything becomes the outflowing expressions of the basic sense that every human person has, the human dignity. And talking about human dignity, again, a small aside, since we gathered here, essentially most of us voted, we all, Catholic or Christians. It is good for you to know that you are the ones who define what human dignity is. In ancient Rome, the word dignitas was used for Roman emperors who came victorious from battle and who came as conquerors. And they were considered as people with dignitas because they are proving their courage and they are proving their valor and they are proving their strength. And when Christianity came to ancient Rome, it took this thing which was referred to Roman generals and conquerors and applied it to the human person, saying that all of us, by reason of our creation by God, have the dignitas. So we have dignitas not because we are courageous and we show valor in battle, but we have dignitas because God created all of us in his image and likeness. So Christianity took this expression and turned it on its head, making it apply to every human person, not by reason of his strength and courage, but by reason of the fact that he or she is created by God. So that is the human dignity that we are talking about. So the vision of business then is grounded in the social doctrine of the church, and at its center is the fundamental dignity of all human beings, because we all made in the image and the likeness of God. This expresses God's infinite love for us. And faith denies that a loving God would wish untruth, bondage, injustice, and strife for us. These are not compatible. We cannot affirm the reality of a loving God who created us and still pursue paths which constitute lies, untruth, bondage, injustice for other people and for ourselves. Rather, based on divine love and human dignity, our faith compels us to embrace four fundamental values: truth, freedom, justice, and peace. Clearly, these values are not unique to our Catholic perspective, but common to all the three great monotheistic faiths and other religions. But because they are grounded in our divinely and lovingly created human nature, as taught by Catholic social doctrine, we have an absolutely firm response when such values are challenged or denied. And so we capture and we pursue all of them. This principle of human dignity are broken up as a service to the common good, universal destination of the goods of the earth, solidarity, to which we can later on add subsidiarity. Therefore, as we pursue this then, concretely applying all of these values that we just talked about, human dignity, common good, universal destination of the goods of the earth, solidarity, and subsidiarity, we suggest that the way of applying all of this in the world of business can be through the threefold proposals of seeing, judging, and acting. It just means that business people see their business the way it is, evaluate the challenges before them, and in judging, they apply their own faith or the church's social teaching to the phenomenon as they see it before them. And from this application of their faith and church's social teaching to the phenomenon, they derive from them concrete lines of action. So this then is what the rest of the booklet deals with. Having proposed the principles that flow from our being created by God and the church social teaching, so that's about the human dignity, how it plays out in the pursuit for the common good, for universal destination of the goods of the earth, the need to be in solidarity with other people. Then we say, how do these concretely apply to business? And we say they can be applied to business through following a three-step application. First, we behold business, how it is done, the challenges and everything, and from the beholding or looking at business, try to discern the very many crucial aspects of it. Then we look at the same phenomenon, this time from the point of view of our faith, from the point of view of teachings of the church, particularly the social teaching of the church and the principles that they espouse. And then from the application of the principles to the phenomenon of business and how we do it, hopefully then to draw from this different lines of action which correspond with our faith brought to the business that we do. So the first thing is to see. So when we invite business people to see anything, we're inviting them to recognize the challenges and the opportunities that they face. For example, globalization, the challenges of communication. And these days, as you know, they're talking about fast rate, trading, and the application of computer to business trading, which does not even allow people to any serious decision making. Everything happens so fast that communication for it to be successful goes on at a very fast speed. So communication technology is transforming the world of business, for everybody. And then the different financialization also of business and everything that is related with it. And then also cultural changes. We can look at each of these and look at them in detail, but globalization of what it is, everybody knows. It's bringing us all closer together. The efficiency of mobility, transportation, and all of that brings us all together and also multiply the implications of what we do. Communication technology has enabled connectivity, new solutions and products, but it's also driven us all to act very fast. The fast rate of operation is also something that affects our business. Then, the financialization of business is a new industry that is also developed. Traditionally, as you know, finance was to serve economics, but finance is now developed into a business of its own and has created ways to leverage capital, to make it more productive, yet it has also intensified tendencies to commoditize all business relationships and to reduce them to one value, namely price, gains, and profit. And there are also the cultural dimensions also to observe. Cultural changes in our era have led to increased individualism, more family breakdowns, and utilitarian preoccupations with oneself and with what is good for one. As a result, we might have more private goods, but are lacking significantly in common goods. Business leaders then increasingly focus on maximizing wealth. Employees develop the attitude of entitlement, and consumers demand instant gratification at the lowest possible price. As values have become relative and rights more important than duties, the goal of serving the common good is often lost. And this also is a challenge for the business leader. So, after inviting the world of business or business leaders to consider all of these challenges that they face, so we say, therefore, that we do not minimize or we do not dismiss any of the real challenges of business. They need to be looked at, they need to be grasped, and they need to be evaluated in a very concrete way. But the challenges that face business are not the end of the picture. Then, after we have obtained a pretty close and clearer vision of everything, then we apply to them, if you want, the principles for judgment. So, namely, our own faith to begin with, and then the church's social teaching, which explicitates our faith. So, how may human dignity then be achieved? How may common good be also pursued in these situations? So the principles of respect for human dignity and pursuit of the common good are the foundations of the church's social teaching. And with regard to the economy, they can be rephrased into three interconnected groups of objectives and characteristics that define the common good, such as a framework for judgment, good work, and then good wealth. So, meeting the needs of the world by developing goods and services, business is invited to contribute to the common good by producing goods that are truly good and that truly serve. Secondly, business is invited to maintain solidarity with the poor by being alert for opportunities to serve deprived, underserved population and people who are in need. Then there is also the factor of the common good. Good work. Organizing good and decent and productive work becomes also a very crucial interest of business. Business should make a contribution to the community by fostering special dignity of human work, and business that embrace subsidiarity provide opportunities also for business to exercise their gifts as they contribute to the mission of their organization. We then also invite business in the same sense to recognize that in doing this, it's also good to recognize a sense of stewardship. Wealth is not simply pursued, but must be good wealth, generating sustainable wealth and distributing it justly. Business model stewardship of the resources, whether capital, human, or environmental, under their control. And business are just in the allocation of the benefits to all stakeholders, employees, customers, investors, suppliers, and even the community who depend on their business. A dimension of this then, especially in the area of business with the business leaders themselves, is the thing of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is a crucial dimension of the exercise of business leadership, because basically it means how does a business leader run his outfit in such a way that every member of the business chain is enabled or empowered to contribute fully to business. It is an injustice, as it were, and at the same time a grave evil and disturbance of right order to assign to a greater and a higher association what lesser and subordinate organizations can do. And this was already said by Pope Pius XI. Therefore, we encourage to respect the competence of families. And respecting the competence of families in business means they need to respect the competence of lower people who serve in the chain of production. And then to encourage employees to be co-entrepreneurs or co-responsible for the production and for everything that happens in business. It means they need, therefore, to recognize that members involved in any business chain also can contribute with their creativity and decision-making to whatever happens. So after the application and the evaluation of all of these principles, then the time for action or the time for acting comes. So receiving then all of this with the first act of the Christian business leader, as of all Christians, is to receive, more specifically, to receive what God has done for him or for her. And in the appreciation of what he has received from God, to consider also giving out from what he has received. So it is first appreciation, therefore, what one has received, and then the giving. The second act, to which the church calls the business leader, is given in a way which responds to what they themselves have received from God. When this is done, then again we thought that to help business people do this, we can probably help them with a checklist. Checklist which consists of questions to assist business leaders to examine their own lives and the policies and the action of their firms, such as a Christian business leader, am I promoting human dignity and the common good in my sphere of influence? Am I supporting the culture of life, justice, international regulations, transparency, civic, environmental, and labor standards, and the fight against corruption, and so on? This last bit against corruption is very crucial. Coming as I do from Africa, I know how this works out in several government contracts. I've seen business people who have come, and I've done this because they have yielded to the demand for corrupt sidekicks. I've also seen business people who have come and have gone away because they're not willing to pay, these 10% to business. I've seen people come, and after accepting to pay the 10% corruption charge, then they come and complain to the church. But I've also seen people come. A big farmer wanted to come. We have a very big hydroelectric power scheme in Ghana. And the water from the dam just runs into the sea. And so a big farming concern came and wanted to develop a big maize farm using the water to irrigate and all of that. And the Minister of Agriculture at that time said, "What is in this for me?" And the "what is in this for me" made the other guy so disappointed that he decided to simply pack up and go away. So corruption sometimes has actually negatively affected several countries because you have serious businessmen who do not want to pay any 10% to people. but some also have done it, and they stay. I don't want to accuse any, but very many of Chinese business now in Africa work on this 10%. They come, they establish, and before you know, all the wood in Mozambique are being cut and shipped to China. All the wood in Cameroon are now on the process of being cut for the same shipment. So it's a very crucial thing. If business can resist sometime with a lot of personal conviction and zeal, the fight against corruption. And then the third thing is for the businessman in this checklist to also ask himself, am I promoting the integral development of the person in my workplace? And the integral development of a person involves not only the spiritual realization of a sense of satisfaction in work and what he does, but the room for him to be creative in contributing to the well-being of business itself. And then finally is the thing about the businessman's own thing about serving God. So by way then of concluding, we wish, basically as I said at the beginning, to provide encouragement to business people. We do not want to put down or condemn business, but to encourage them and to support them, also in responding to their own vocation to be Christians, but Christian business people. So finally, we encourage the business people to recognize that business and workers are not commodities. They are not things to be treated as commodities or objects. And then we also encourage them to recognize the good character of business. Good business is good for common good. We use the word good almost 3 times. Good business is good for the common good. And this is a goal that we like to present to all business people. And so, we wish then to conclude by congratulating this chapter of UNIAPAC here in Budapest. And we wish to congratulate you and then also encourage you with these concluding words. Business and workers indeed are not commodities. They need to be considered also as persons created in the image and the likeness of God. Neither also are your clients and those whom you serve with your business also commodities and people to be, as it were, taken advantage of. Therefore, we conclude by encouraging all to see that good business is good for the common good. And when we exercise our business, it is to be good business people. It is to provide goods which are really good, and it is ultimately to help the common good. With these concluding words, then, I like to pray that the chapter and everything that you're beginning today, with these few days with this seminar, may help advance the cause of Christian businessmen in this part of the world, in this part of Europe, and we pray that God would inspire generous desires to serve the common good and daily grant us an abundant grace to bring them all to fulfillment. Thank you, and God bless your endeavor.